What was that? Oh, it was just you. Shh. We're creeping through this wall. And if you make too much noise, they're gonna hear you. Who's they? Zombies. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know how I'm gonna get out of here. I have to discover a cure. I have to discover the source of these zombies. But I just don't know how I'm gonna do it. Maybe you can help me. Maybe I can then make the best of the situation. Maybe I could turn it into a game review. That sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? Maybe today on Never Enough Gaming, we'll be able to review Tiny Epic Zombies. So, Tiny Epic Zombies is a fairly simplistic game in terms of its mechanics once you kind of get past the fact that it looks like a little bit of a complicated setup when you're setting it up. Every game starts with 9 mall tiles. These cards make up your game board. They always surround a courtyard, and the courtyard will read whether it's competitive or cooperative play. Currently, this game is set up for 1 zombie player and 2 survivors, whether they're played by 1 person or played by 2 individual players. Those are your human players, and they will act first to start the game off. The objective behind the game is you are trying to complete the 3 objectives that are dealt out randomly before the game. In this particular aspect, let's take this one for example. This objective is investigate the source, and your objective in this is to investigate clues to find 3 sources of the outbreak, and you have to kind of guess and try and find the right tokens, which are these clue tokens right here, and you have to travel around to discover them. In terms of what you do as a human on your turn, all you have to do is move 3 times. So you start your courtyard, 1, 2, 3. Now, between those moves, after each move, you can complete an action. You can either pick up one of your tokens that might be in the room with you, you can kill a zombie, you can use one of the actions here. For instance, this is a running action, and any of the search or pick up item functions have to be done after your moves, but they can be done in between your sets of moves. Let's go through each of your options that you have after you move. So, say we are this token right here. This is your little meeple, and you are moving 1 movement. There's nothing you can do here currently. You can move your second movement and go into this room because they share a wall. This gives you the option of either going into this room or this room. Both of them share a wall. So now that you've moved into this room, you can use the gain 1 ammunition action if you wanted to, and that would put your ammunition, say you were down a little bit. Oh, this would be the player right here. So say you were down a little bit, you could actually move that back up and go back towards the 9. You always want to keep your health and your ammo separated as much as possible, because if they ever meet or cross, then you're considered either too poorly armed or too badly injured to continue fighting in the zombie apocalypse, and you are eaten alive. So in this room, you can do that action, and then your third move brings you into this room. This room now puts you into a room with a zombie. You now have to attack that zombie. If you're in the room with the zombie, you have to use your melee attack, and that causes you to roll this die right here. This die is your melee attack die, and it has several options. The die here, if you get this is the overrun option. This means that you can attack the zombie, kill it, you don't get injured or anything attacking it, and then you get a free movement into an adjacent room. It's an optional move, but you're allowed to do it if you get that result. If you get this result here, this is just a standard death. You killed the zombie, nothing happened, you didn't get hurt. There's two of these. There's two of the overrun markers, and then there's two wound markers. Like this one gives you 1 wound, and this one gives you 2 wounds. So those are the bad ones. Those are the ones you don't want to roll. Now, you came in, and regardless of whatever your dice roll was, you still kill that zombie. Say, after you moved into this one initially, let's put this guy back here, you didn't want to use this action, but you still had an action you can use because you moved. You can then attack this zombie from an adjacent room, but you have to use a range attack. So you would use your pistol on the player, and you have to use 1 ammunition and move it down to 8. Now you're a little bit closer to your wound token, but you have killed the zombie without having to run the risk of going in there and having to roll the melee die, which could potentially give you a wound or 2 wounds. And now when you move, you can move into that room with your 3rd movement, and you can now pick up your clue marker. In this case, this one is the virus clue marker towards your objective. And this is some of the strategy that goes into moving your meeple around, because you can never act before moving. So in the case of what we did the first time, say we started at 8, we moved into this room, and after our 2nd movement, we wanted to gain 1 ammunition. We then went back in, we meleeed, we rolled the die, and we got a basic kill. And now it goes around, we start our next turn, and here we are not able to pick up this clue. We have to move. So that requires us to either move into another room over here, do something, and then move back to grab this clue, or move into this room, perform the action, and then go back and grab the clue. It makes board positioning important in the game. And since you're somewhat on a clock with the objectives needing to be complete and your potential search deck running out, this kind of functions as your clock. If this runs out, then that's the end of the game, and the zombie player is going to be adding zombies as you move along. So you're kind of on a clock. So positioning your player with the ideal outcome of each movement and action is the efficient way to go. So in this case, the more efficient action would have been to probably use the ammunition, grab your clue on your next movement, and then you've completed those 2 options on that turn. After the human player completes all of their movements, they will then search the room that they are in. That's the last stage of their turn. And this is how searching works. Searching the room functions like this. In the beginning of the game, the zombie player will deal out 1 card to each of the players playing that comes from the search deck. This will be in his hand to start the game, his or her hand. And it is only during the search phase that the players are allowed to look at this card. So at the end of the turn, when you perform the search action, you flip over the card. In the case of this card, it's an event card. That symbol means event. So you have to resolve the function right here. This one's place 1 additional zombie into this store, then discard the card. So that would automatically add a zombie to the store that you're in. This can be pretty dangerous because if you happen to be in a room that would be the next numbered space, there's 3 numbers on each room, and it goes to the lowered number space that the zombie can be placed on. If you happen to be in that, then you immediately take 1 wound when the zombie is placed. And in the case of something like this is a weapon. So a weapon card would then be placed down on the space that you had searched, or that your meeple was standing in when you searched, and it can then be interacted with on the next turn. Of course, you have to move first, but then you can interact with the item. And the symbols that are in the top corner of the card, these both actually have the same symbol. Didn't matter really which one was drawn, but will then lead into the zombie player's turn and how they kind of start and add zombies and are able to use their abilities. So once you've searched the room, the human player's turn is over. Now we get into the zombie player's turn, and this is how this goes. So the zombie player's turn starts off with the search card from the previous player's turn. So say this was the card that was searched. And in the case of this player, they happen to be in a room that matches the symbol that's on the corner of the search card. If this is the case, then the zombie player is able to activate their special ability right here. And after they've activated that ability, they are able to move up the horde token to the next level. In this case, it would still be the same ability the next time they use it, but then they can add it up to that one, which allows them to use the next ability, and then eventually they can get to the end. The only time that they can't move it up any further is if they have already reached the top. You can't go beyond that. Each zombie player also has a automatic ability that comes into effect on every turn. So that's something that can kind of help in adding zombies, or it could take away ammo, or it can prevent characters from using certain abilities, the human players, and those can really kind of get in the way sometimes of the human players playing. Now, in the case of having a card that doesn't match the room that the player is starting in, or the player searched in, then the zombie player would place zombie tokens into each of the stores that match the symbol. There will always be 2 stores that match every symbol. So you can either place 1 zombie in each of those stores, or you can place both zombies in one of the stores. This is kind of where the strategy of the zombie player comes into play. And it definitely makes it sort of the ideal way to play the game by having a zombie player rather than just like an AI zombie, because the game does come with a way for you to just play with the game against you rather than another player against you. Now, there's obviously more complexity to the game beyond the overview that we've kind of gone over, but I'm not going to get into specifics of the objective cards or all of the items or all of the player abilities, but there is a lot of variability in this game. So let's now take a look at my pros and cons and some final thoughts on the game. Okay, everyone, now that you know how to play the game and you know the mechanics behind playing the game, I'm going to go into my pros and cons. I'm going to start off with cons because I only have a couple of them. The first one I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite subjects to talk about with any pros and cons list, is the components. As much as I love the components, and I'll talk about the pros in a minute, there are a couple of issues that I run into when it comes to the paint on some of the wooden figures. The little figures are great in terms of how they look, but I have run into a lot of the wooden figures chipping off their paint. And as you can see, there's some chips that'll end up on my table here and there, and that's kind of annoying. They end up on your hands. Like I can actually pull one off right now. There's a little one that's from the playthrough that I was running earlier, and they just kind of get everywhere. And you can see the little missing sections of the pieces where the paint had fallen off. And that's kind of annoying. I really haven't come across that in any other game. I don't really know why it's like that with this game, but after a while of handling them, there are some missing spots on the pieces, and it gets on the table and things like that. And I don't know if it's a problem with specifically my game, or it's something with a specific batch, because I have a friend who has the game and he has a similar problem, but it's just kind of annoying. And again, that's more of an annoyance than it is really a con about the game, but you know, it goes into the components. And the other con that I have is it can run a little bit long if on the first couple of playthroughs, especially with new players. It does say in the box that it's easy entry, and once you know the rules, it definitely is easy entry. Like if you have somebody who's played it through a couple times, or even 1 or 2 times, they can kind of explain the rules really easily, but the instruction booklet is not the clearest. The first time I read through it, I kind of had a little bit of a learning curve trying to figure out what some of the things we're talking about. Some of the objectives are not super clear immediately, but that's not a game breaker for me. And once you get it down, the rules are really simple once you kind of get through that initial setup process. So I'm going to list it as a con, but again, both those cons are kind of minor cons in my opinion. And now let's move on to pros. My pros are really simple. It's a great game. I'm just going to start off by saying it's a great game, and I want to express to you how much I like this game because I really feel like more than any other game in the series, it lives up to the Tiny Epic title. It is a small box with a full-size game in it. It doesn't take up a lot of space when you pull it out. It has all of the components neatly packed into that box, and it really feels like a full-size game, and that's really cool. It's something that you can bring around with you really easily, constantly going back and forth to friends' house, to conventions, to a lot of different places to work, to team nights, to Dungeons and Dragons sessions, to a lot of places that I could bring games if we want to take a break in between different things, or if I just want to get a group together that wants to play some board games. This is a perfect kind of game to bring with us. It's my favorite out of the Tiny Epic, and it just supplants Tiny Epic Galaxies, which was my previous favorite. That was my first exposure to the series, and I had played Defenders, and I felt like Defenders didn't quite live up to Galaxies, but this one definitely kind of trumps that just because of the variability of the game. That's probably my next con, and probably the biggest out of the whole thing, is it has so much replayability just based on the fact that you have the objective cards, which based on the 3 that you pull out, and if you randomly assign them, the 3 that you pull out are going to make the game different every time. You're very rarely going to come across the same objective combinations, especially if you're not playing all the time. Like, this is obviously not going to be the only game that you're playing. And based on who plays the zombie player every time, we kind of, when I play with my different gaming groups, we kind of cycle it around. Nobody plays the zombie player every time. So everybody's got their different play styles. Everybody has their favorite objectives. Everybody has their favorite players. Every zombie player has their favorite zombie that they like to play as. And that just adds a lot of variability to it with the amount of combinations you can have. I love the fact that it has solo play that actually plays like a real part of the game. A lot of games put in a solo play method, but it's kind of something that wasn't really considered when they were designing the game, and they're like, oh, we can make this solo, and then they just kind of make something like that. Star Realms, for instance, has ways where you can play solo against objectives, against like the kind of challenge cards, and that doesn't work very well, in my opinion at least. And this game really works for solo play. It works great for a head-to-head where you're playing with 2 human players versus the zombie player, in terms of just one actual player playing 2 human characters versus that zombie player. That works really well. It works fully cooperative. It works competitive versus a zombie player. It works competitive against the game. All of these game modes feel like they're actually a part of the game, and they all play just as effectively as the others. As much as I talked about the components in the con section with the paint chipping off, I also want to talk about how much I love them in general. The design to them, the zombie tokens, are really awesome. I like the little artwork on it. I mean, it's not the most intricate, but it definitely comes off as zombies. I love the little police car and the motorcycle. Those are really cool. When they actually become kind of part of the game, that's really awesome. It reminds me of the old like play school figures with the people that you'd put on the cars and the motorcycles and stuff and drive them around as a kid. I love the player cards, the artwork on them. I love the fact that the zombie versions of the human players, actually look like that is what they would look like as a zombie, and the character attributes are really fitting to them. And sometimes I do run into the cards bending. It seemed like when I opened up my box, all of the cards were a little bit bent. I don't know if that was just kind of to make sure that they all fit together and don't slide around too much in the box, but it's not a major problem. The player cards, the zombie cards, the mall tiles, they all hold up really well over a lot of plays. And I've busted out this game a fair amount of times, and it's still looking in great shape outside of the chipping of the paint, which at this point is not really anything I can do about it. And I love the weapon tokens. The weapon tokens are really awesome, and they fit into the meeple, so you can hold them to denote which weapons your meeple is holding, and that just looks really cool when you have your meeple holding like a chainsaw and a crossbow in one hand, and that's really cool. It kind of adds to the thematic tension. The another pro to this game is the fact that it it stays close to the playtime that they say on the box. It can run a little bit long sometimes, but for the most part, it stays close to that playtime. The longest my games will run is maybe an hour, which is 15 minutes over the maximum time that they recommend, and or maybe an hour and 15 minutes if I'm playing with like the maximum amount of players, a zombie player and four human players, and that's pretty close to the amount that they're saying that it can last on for a game that scales to that many players. And that's always something that I'm looking for in my games, where it's not going to drag on to an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes when it tells you on the box it's only going to last for 45. Beyond that, I love the theme that the game brings to it. And that's really something that's powerful in a zombie game. There's a tension that comes from moving around the board and the zombies kind of spawning whenever you search for something, or they could possibly spawn in the room that you're in. It's all based on random chance with those search cards. And that tension and that ticking clock that comes from the search deck and the zombie player working against you really works with the thematic elements of it. And that's something I'm always looking for in my zombie games. The artwork all kind of leans in towards that, and it creates this great feeling at the table that you're actually a survivor, kind of surviving against these zombies. Now, let's go into my final thoughts and give it a final score. I'm going to break my mold, and I am going to give it a 9, which is the highest rating I've given to a game so far, and that's because I absolutely love this game. I think it definitely lives up to the Tiny Epic category. It's definitely a game that you can pull around and take with you to a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different venues, to play with a lot of different types of groups. It's pretty good for most ages. There's some thematic elements that you might not with like young kids, but if you have a casual gaming group, they would be able to pick this game up pretty quickly because the mechanics of it are not particularly difficult, especially if you have somebody who's played before to explain it. So I would definitely recommend that you go out and try and pick up this game and get it into your regular rotation. Your friends will have a lot of fun with it no matter what type of group you are. So I'm gonna have some links down below. Those links will show you where you can get Tiny Epic Zombies. It's no extra cost to you, but it really helps out the channel, and I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Never Enough Gaming, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks everyone for joining me on this final Halloween-themed episode of Never Enough Gaming. Into November, we're going to be bringing you the same quality content, but we're going to be broadening the theme a little bit. As much as I love spooky-themed games, we're going to be kind of looking into some other themes. If you love the zombie theme for Tiny Epic Zombies, then go check out my Dead of Winter video. It's already been posted on the channel. And if you love horror in general and want to look at probably my favorite horror-themed game, then go look at Mountains of Madness. I just recently posted it. If you love what you see on the channel, feel free to subscribe, leave a comment down below talking about your favorite Halloween themed game, hit that like button, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified about everything that I post in the future. And I'll catch you in the next episode.